Hi guys, I will be creating a series of tutorials to describe a few things about FIFA, and it's gonna be a very inclusive series. So I will be aiming to explain pretty much everything I know and pretty much everything that I will also be researching about FIFA 18. And this is gonna start with basic things like the attribute details of players. It will move to attacking ways, how to attack, how to defend. It's going to explain tactics, strategy, things about football, and how you should be approaching your game. So I will be aiming to create an all-inclusive series of tutorials in order to help you with your game and also learn more myself as well, since I enjoy the game a lot. So I wanted to start with what is probably the most important thing when you begin a game of FIFA and understanding how players really work. So sometimes you may be playing a game and you are thinking why something happened, like why did I lose the ball there? I mean, why didn't my player control that better? What happened there? Is it some sort of a FIFA thing? Is it a glitch or something? So I kind of wanted to explain each of the attributes of a player's card very specifically, just by telling you exactly what it means. And so next time you can pick a player based on their attributes and have a better judgment on whether they are actually good for your team. And especially with FAT, that's extremely important, right? So let's start off with a player who is very popular in FIFA 18. Pretty much everybody who has a BPL team at some point bought them or will buy them. He should be pretty expensive right now. I would think that he's around 80k. So he's a great player. His name is I think they call him Jesus. Sometimes I call him Jesus. I'm not sure which is the best one, which is the actual correct way of calling him. But I think it's Jesus, something like that. Anyway. So yeah, let's examine his attributes and specifically explain what each one of those are. So we're starting with pace, and his pace is 87. Pace consists of two things: acceleration and sprint speed. So this is the actual pace that you see here, 87, is actually the average of these two attributes, the average of acceleration and sprint speed. And the same goes with all the other attributes. It's an average of all of their sub attributes. So acceleration is about how quickly, how fast a player can actually reach their top speed. So a player has a top speed, obviously. I mean, it starts from 0 kilometers per hour or 0 miles an hour, and as they start running, they reach a top speed. So that's what acceleration is about. Sprint speed is about how what is the max of that speed, like how fast they can actually run. So as you can understand, it is important for a quick player to have a very high sprint speed, but it's also important to have a high acceleration as well. Because if they don't have a high acceleration, they will feel kind of heavy. It will take a little bit more time for them to reach their top sprint speed, and so they will feel as if they are not very fast actually. They will feel slower than you would actually think based on their sprint speed. So when you buy a player and you are aiming for pace, make sure that acceleration and sprint speed are also about the same, and obviously sprint speed should also be high, but make sure that acceleration is not much less than the sprint speed. That's very important. So if you have like a player with a sprint speed of 90 and acceleration of 70, their pace will be 80, and you would think that they will be very fast because of their sprint speed, but that's not going to be the case, because the acceleration is going to be very slow in comparison to their speed, and you will be like, why does it take so much time for them to reach their speed and run? And that is why. Now you know why, in case you didn't know actually about that. So moving on to the shooting attributes, and obviously this has more to do with attacking players. I mean, attacking players are obviously more affected by the shooting attributes. So with attacking positioning, This is about how good a player is in spotting the open space in front of them and moving like behind defenders, for example. So finding that free space and taking the move really. And this is important for the AI, for example, because a higher attacking position will make sure that your player tries to get a better position in open space. And with Jesus, that's actually a thing here. His rating is 83. So if you play with behind the defense style, pretty much, they will be able to take a good position behind the defense and try to keep themselves off the offside trap, quickly moving around the offside trap. So they're going to be a menace for defensive lines, especially the ones that are playing in pretty much in parallel. So finishing has to do with how easily a player can score, what their shooting is, how good a shot that they take is, but it has to do with the shots that happen inside the box. So remember that finishing is only about the shots that happen inside the box, not outside of it. For outside the box is actually the long shots. So Jesus has great finishing here as well, so he can take shots inside the box and score most of them. So important to have this attribute for attackers as well. That's very, very important. So moving on with shot power, obviously that's kinda obvious. It's how powerful a shot of a player can be without losing much of its accuracy. That's also pretty important, and this will make it easier for you to take shots that don't go like way out of the stadium or something. So a better shot power affects the accuracy as well, and how much power you will have to give with your controller, and it's more forgiving really if you have a higher attribute here. Volleys is about the accuracy of shooting when the ball is in the air. So if Jesus doesn't have a very good attribute on this one, so if he gets the ball off the air and tries to take a volley, he will probably miss. His volleys are not that great, and knowing that, it's a good way to remember that when you get the ball in the air with Jesus and you are controlling Jesus, it's probably a better idea to actually control the ball instead of actually take a shot while the ball is in the air. And this is how you should be thinking about your players now. If you know their attributes, you know their strengths and weaknesses, and so you can take advantage of that. And in your game, plan to play in a fashion that will actually take advantage of this attribute. So don't aim in taking a lot of volleys with Jesus. And also, I wouldn't be taking a lot of long shots as well. And as I mentioned, long shots is shots outside of the box. You may take a couple here and there, but they're not gonna be his best asset. His best asset is finishing inside the box, as you see here, and that's very, very important to know. His strength, his pace, finishing inside the box, and finding that proper position in order to bypass a defender, for example, or pass through a defender, break the defensive line. Penalties is obviously how easy it's going to be for you to score a penalty with Jesus, and that affects pretty much the control and the power, so it's more forgiving again. If you take a shot and you are, let's say, way too right, if you have a high penalty attribute, you may actually hit that shot inside the goal instead of sending it wide, so it makes it more forgiving pretty much for you. Vision is in the passing attributes, is a very interesting attribute. Some of you may not be aware of this, and that's really important to know about. So vision actually affects how a player perceives and how a player sees his teammates and his opponents on the pitch. And this means that let's say that I have a player that Jesus wants to pass to a player that's 30 meters away from him, right? So pretty far. So his vision affects whether he actually sees that player. So you may be seeing that player in your monitor, but Jesus won't have the proper vision in some situations to actually pass to that player. And you have seen these situations where you're actually trying to pass to a player that's a little bit far, and the ball goes somewhere else, like somewhere completely different, and you're like, why did he pass there? Like, why did he pass to the closer player while I was attempting to pass with a strong pass on a faraway player? And that could be one of the reasons, like the fact that his vision doesn't actually allow him to have the presence of mind to actually discover that the player is there, because the AI also takes part on your actual passes, and you may not know about it, but vision is what would affect a pass like that. So remember that, it's pretty important. Crossing affects the obviously crosses, and that would affect the accuracy of crosses, and would also be affecting. It would also affect how likely a cross would be to find a teammate in the box when you are taking it from the wing, for example. Very important as well. It also affects the curve of the ball also, so that would make it more likely to find a player and pass like the first defender, and the curve attribute also affects that, of course. So it's about how much the ball will bend in order to find a player and bypass the defender. So I would say like a good combination would be required for a midfielder here to be able to take good crosses. The free kick accuracy is the chance of finding the goal, really finding not scoring. I mean, actually finding the goal. So be able to hit the target, really. So it's not about scoring. It's about being able to hit the target. So you'll notice that players with very low free kick accuracy will just send the ball wide regardless of your controller, really. They will just send it wide and very high or on the wall or something. That's because their free kick attribute is terrible. So always try to pick a free kick attribute that's actually pretty good when you are taking free kicks. That's pretty important for the ball to actually go in, for starters, reach the target. So short passing is obviously how potent the player is with their short passes and how possibly it would be for their short passes to connect. So how accurate their passing is going to be and we're talking about short passes here, so it's going to be short distance passes. Long passes is the opposite. It's again about passing, but it's actually long passes here. So this doesn't have to do with whether you're pressing X or if you're talking about the PlayStation, whether you're actually doing a standard pass or you're pressing the square button to take like a sort of like cross type of pass, like a long pass. But it's about the distance. So if the distance of a player is rather large, we're talking about a long pass. So it affects the accuracy again and how likely and how quickly also the ball will reach that player. So higher passing attributes are definitely required for your attackers as well, if possible, but mainly for your midfielders actually, who should be controlling the ball in the middle of the pitch most of the time. So curve, as I explained earlier, is about how much your player will be able to curve the ball in order to. It matters for everything, really. It's not only about crosses. It's for example for free kicks as well. So it's important to be able to bend the ball in certain situations. So it's an attribute that's good to have, especially for your midfielders and attackers, of course. So moving on with dribbling, and you see that Jesus has great dribbling attributes here, and dribbling, generally speaking, is about how well your player can control the ball, right? That's what it is. So the technical attributes of your player, really. So if we're talking about a player's agility, and pretty much agility is how much a player is, how responsive actually a player will be when you are trying to control him. So how agile he will be, how fluid in his movements. That's what it means. How quickly you can move him without feeling that lag. So how agile he feels. That's what that means. So you have noticed that some players feel heavy when you are trying to control them, and that's possibly because they have a low agility value. And balance is about how likely a player is actually to fall down or lose their balance when there is like a physical challenge. between them and as the opponent. So you notice that some players tend to go down a lot, for example. That's because it may be actually one of the reasons that they don't have enough strength also, but they may just not have a good balance. So it's easier for them to trip. And you are like, why did he fall again? Oh my god, I missed another chance because of that. So moving on to the next one, his a player's reactions is about how quickly and how quickly pretty much a player will react when things are happening. So for example, have you noticed that you are trying to take a counter attack and some players are actually stalling, and you're like, why aren't you moving, man? I mean, you don't have a sense of urgency, and that may be because his reactions are not high. So with a player like Jesus, whenever you get the ball, he would be reacting very quickly to the things that you are doing. If you are trying to find the space, if you are trying to take a counter attack, and that's one more reason why a lot of players actually love Jesus, because he feels very responsive to your moves, to whatever you are trying to do on the pitch. So the next thing is ball control, and that's I would think pretty self-explanatory. It's about how your player feels when you are controlling the ball, and that's about like first touches, for example, like how good a first touch is without actually losing the ball or sending it far from your player, and how you can actually control the ball while you have it on your feet also. Like if you are sprinting, for example, does your player actually send the ball very far away from his body, or can he keep it very close to him when he's running? So that's affected by ball control. That's very important for attackers and of course midfielders. Dribbling, obviously, how well and how fluidly a player can execute a dribble. Jesus is stellar on this, of course. Composure is a new attribute that has been added. I think it was added in FIFA 17, if I'm not mistaken. And this is about how well a player acts when they're under pressure. And that's especially important for attackers, of course, because if they are physically challenged by somebody and they take the shot, a high composure will allow them to take the shot in a way that's acceptable. So they won't just send the ball wide because they are marked. They will be able to take a shot under difficult circumstances, for example. So that's something that's pretty important for attackers. You should make sure that they have high composure, especially when you are playing against, let's say, the AI, who is marking super tightly, and you will guarantee to have a lot of defenders around you. So defending is obviously one of the bad things about Jesus. He's not a defender, so his worst attributes are here. So interceptions are obviously how likely a player is to intercept a ball, how good they are with their interceptions, and obviously this is very good for defenders, right? And you shouldn't be expecting it with players like Jesus, but it affects also your other players as well, like the players that are defending that you're not controlling, for example. So it affects how likely they are to intercept the ball. So heading accuracy obviously has to do with how likely they are to take a header and how accurate their header would be. Again, it's something that Jesus is mediocre with, so it's not his best attribute here. He's not a player who is gonna be like the best with headers. Of course, that makes sense when you actually think about his height as well. So you should be expecting that attribute to be higher in players that are also taller for the most part and more meaty. More strong. So marking obviously has to do with how good a player is with the marking and how much they can keep, how fluid they are in keeping how good actually they are in keeping their position in relation to the attacker. So for example, if you contain a player and they have a good and your player has a good marking attribute, it's gonna be easier for you not to lose your position in regards to the opponent. So you have noticed that sometimes you may be containing and you easily lose a player, and you're like, how did they actually go by me so easily even though I was containing? And that's because their marking attribute may not be very high also. That also affects the player movement in defense. So yeah, it's about pretty much how far you can follow a player and how close you can be to them when you are defending. So standing tackle and slide tackle are pretty much self-explanatory. Again, it's how well you can perform a standing tackle or a sliding tackle and keep possession as well. That's a very important thing. You have noticed at times that you are taking a standing tackle and the ball goes so far from your player and you are like, oh my god, I gave them the ball again. Why is that? That's because your standing tackle is not high. You may be doing that with an attacker, for example. And even though you're performing the standing tackle and you're not conceding a foul, you still can't keep the ball at your feet, and it's frustrating. But it's probably because the standing tackle attribute is low for that player. And finishing with the physical attributes, jumping is about how high a player can jump. For example, when you are getting a header, right? So that's an important attribute for for getting a header, for example. And it's not only about how high; it's about how efficient the player would be with their header as well. So stamina is about how much you can run with a player before they get very tired, and also how tired they get as the game progresses. So you have seen the bar, obviously, the fitness bar. So the better your stamina, the more you will be able to run with that player, and for a longer period of time, each time pretty much that you are attempting the run. So strength is obviously about how strong your player is in physical attempts, like where you are attempting like a physical struggle, a physical. So when you're attempting to get the ball physically by somebody, so you have a physical challenge there. So how good you are with that, so that affects the likelihood of being able to challenge a player physically. And Jesus, for example, is not so good here because again he's a lean player. He's not like a very strong muscle guy, and most of the times this attribute is self-explanatory. If you see a very lean player, they're probably having a low attribute for strength. And if they are a very tall player and a very like strong player, a very very tall and like, how do you say, like wide, not wide. If you see a player that is very tall and he's obviously looking strong, they will probably be pretty strong. So you can actually tell this attribute just by looking at the player's figure. And aggression is the last of the attributes, and it's about how aggressive a player will be with their tackles. For example, like their marking, for example. So a player who is aggressive will probably be stealing the ball more. Like this would be a defensive midfielder, for example. But it's more likely for them to also concede a foul, especially if their standing tackle attribute is low, if they are performing a standing tackle, or if their sliding tackle attribute is low, if they are performing a sliding tackle. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of player attributes, and I will be finishing this tutorial here. There will be more. As I mentioned, I will aim to make this a long series of tutorials, so it will be useful, I think, for you to subscribe. There will be a lot of things being discussed in the tutorials to come. Thank you for watching, guys. Please remember to like the video and subscribe. This will help me with creating more and more videos and tutorials about FIFA 18. Make sure that you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!